like to tell you a story that is a fun story. It's a story that happened at the Global Health Missions Conference here this last fall, and it tells about how God is at work behind the scenes, sometimes when we don't know it, and sometimes over a long period of time, and He brings people and situations together from a lot of different directions to work out His perfect will and work in people's lives. And what happened is, I was at the Global Health Missions Conference this last fall, and I met a doctor who's been part of Southwestern Medical Clinic for a long number of years, Dr. Roy Ringenberg, a missionary in Ecuador, returned to the States for a number of family and health issues, but he was at the conference, and we met him there, and it was good to see him and just make that acquaintance again. Then later in the day or the next day, I was in the exhibitor area, and I met a group of students, medical students, and connected with them and was telling them a little bit about Southwestern Medical Clinic and how we were a group that was interested in combining medical care and missions in our practice and trying to be a local witness for Christ. And there were a group of 3 students, and this one girl says, "Oh yeah," she goes, "I know this Southwestern Medical Clinic. Isn't this a group that Dr. Roy Ringenberg is part of?" And I said, yeah, Dr. Ringenberg is one of my partners and one of my missionary partners. And she goes, "Dr. Ringenberg changed my life. He's the reason I'm in medicine." And just as she said, "Dr. Ringenberg changed my life," Dr. Ringenberg rocked right behind her. And it was really funny for me to watch this because I'm seeing this happen. She's talking about Dr. Ringenberg. He walks up behind her. And then it got really funny after that because Dr. Ringenberg walked past her, and he walked around, and he stood behind me so that he's standing over here and she's standing over here, and she's talking about Dr. Ringenberg, and Dr. Ringenberg's standing over here, and I'm doing this. I'm looking at her, and I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at her, and I'm looking at him, and I realize that she doesn't realize that that's him standing there. She doesn't see him or know it, and he doesn't realize, he's in another conversation, he doesn't realize that this lady over here is talking about him. So I walked over to Dr. Ringenberg. I said, "Excuse me a second, Dr. Ringenberg, come here a second." I said, and I brought him over to this other circle, and I said, "Dr. Ringenberg, did you know you changed this lady's life?" And he looked at her, and she looked at him, and I realized that they didn't recognize each other, because I found out they hadn't seen each other in over 20 years. And she was a little girl when she had last seen Dr. Ringenberg. And yet she was giving this story how Dr. Ringenberg had changed his life. So all of a sudden I said to her, "This is Dr. Ringenberg." And she went, "Oh my gosh." And she, gave him a big hug and all that sort of thing. Turns out that her family, when she was little, had been praying and supporting Dr. Ringenberg for many years. And they had created a friendship and a partnership and a prayer partnership online and by phone or whatever it was over the decades. And he had given her counsel on going into missionary medicine and how to get involved in medicine. And he had been praying for her for 15 or 20 years that she would have find God's plan for her life, and here she was pursuing a career in medicine and interested in medical missions, largely because of the interaction that he had had with her over the years. And it was fun as a bystander to watch this unfold, where they hadn't seen each other and didn't even recognize each other until this serendipitous moment of God bringing them together at that missions conference. It was just a fun moment to remember how God is at work through things that we say. Sometimes it spans many decades and bears fruit in other people's lives many years down the line.